My boyfriend and I had been in a long, distance relationship for 3 years. He claimed to be a trauma surgeon with the Navy, constantly deployed. We video called daily and saw each other twice a year. I thought it was the perfect arrangement, built on trust and love. Our relationship felt solid, despite the distance. Every time I saw him, it was like time had stood still, and the connection we shared was as strong as ever. I decided to surprise him in San Diego. He had mentioned he'd be there for training, and I thought this would be the perfect time to break the routine. I'd bought a plane ticket without telling him, planning to show up unannounced. It felt like a grand romantic gesture, one that would show him how much I cared. My best friend, Jessica, had a different opinion. She thought I was crazy. She kept pushing me to date other people, insisting long-distance relationships never worked, but I brushed her off. I believed in us. I believed in Brett. He was worth waiting for. The flight was long and filled with anticipation. I spent the entire journey scrolling through our old conversations, laughing at inside jokes and reminiscing about the time we had spent together. When I finally landed, I couldn't help but smile. I was excited. I was about to surprise the love of my life. I took a cab straight to the naval base, where he'd told me he'd be for training. I'd imagined him in his military uniform, busy but always finding time to call or text me between his duties. But as I stepped into the visitor center, everything felt off. The clerk behind the counter was young, disinterested, and barely glanced up from her computer as I explained that I was there to see Lieutenant Brett Rhodes. I gave her his name and waited, the silence stretching longer than I expected. She frowned at her screen. "Mom, we have no record of an officer by that name." I blinked. "Are you sure? Lieutenant Brett Rhodes. He's a trauma surgeon, deployed overseas for most of the year. He's been stationed here for a few weeks for training." She typed again, her fingers clicking rapidly, but then shook her head. "I'm sorry, there's no officer by that name." "Are you sure about the spelling?" I pulled out my phone, showing her a text conversation with Brett. I pointed to his name in the messages, hoping that would clear up the confusion. She stared at the screen for a long moment before shaking her head again. "Could he be at a different base?" I asked, trying to remain calm. She offered to get her supervisor. I watched as she turned toward the back office, a sinking feeling growing in my chest. There had to be a mistake. Maybe he was at a different facility. Maybe his name had been misspelled in the system, but my gut twisted in a way I couldn't ignore. While I waited, a uniformed MP walked past. I caught his eye and showed him the photo of Brett in his military dress uniform. "Do you know where I can find Lieutenant Brett Rhodes?" I asked, my voice slightly shaky. He took the phone from me and studied the image for a few seconds before handing it back. "Mom, that uniform is a costume," he said flatly. "The rank insignia is upside down." The words didn't register at first. I stared at the MP, then back at the photo of Brett smiling in his uniform, proud and confident. I blinked, trying to make sense of what he'd said. "What do you mean upside down?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The MP pointed to the screen. "Wrong placement of the insignia, incorrect ribbons. Whoever sold him that didn't know what they were doing." A sick feeling crawled into my stomach. I couldn't understand. The man I'd been in love with, the man I thought I knew, was a complete stranger. How had I not seen this? How had I missed this glaring sign that everything was wrong? I felt numb as I left the visitor center. My hands shook as I walked to the taxi, the words of the MP echoing in my mind. I had to know the truth. I had to find out what was really going on. My only option was to go to the return address on the packages Brett had sent me over the years. The ones with the little notes he wrote, the ones that always made me smile. The ones I had kept, tucked away like memories of someone I thought was real. I had to see it for myself. I had to face whatever truth awaited me. As the taxi drove through the streets of San Diego, my heart pounded in my chest. The world seemed to blur around me. I kept telling myself that I was just overreacting, that this was a simple misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew something was horribly wrong. When the cab pulled up to the house, I barely recognized the neighborhood. It looked so ordinary. A small, suburban street with houses lined up in neat rows, kids playing in front yards, dogs running by. I paid the driver, my hands shaking as I grabbed my bag, and stepped out onto the curb. The address matched the one on the packages. This was it. I walked up the driveway, my feet feeling like they were moving through molasses. I was already preparing myself for the worst. But nothing could have prepared me for what was behind that door. I knocked, my heart racing, and the door swung open. A woman stood in front of me, a baby on her hip. Two children, no older than 5 or 6, ran past her legs, bickering over whose turn it was with the tablet. She looked at me with curiosity, her smile polite but distant. "Can I help you?" she asked. I swallowed hard. "I'm looking for Brett Rodis. He's my boyfriend," I said, my voice faltering as I tried to explain. "I've been trying to reach him. I thought he was stationed here." The woman's eyes widened for a moment. Then she stepped back, looking over her shoulder. "Brett's my brother," she said, her voice almost apologetic. "Come in." She ushered me into the house, and as I stepped across the threshold, I felt like the ground was slipping out from under me. Something wasn't right. Something was very wrong. As she led me through the house, she seemed hesitant, unsure of what to say. I asked her, my voice barely above a whisper, "Is Brett here?" Her response was the last thing I ever expected. "He's not who you think he is." I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. The woman, Melanie, gestured for me to follow her through the living room. I could hear the kids in the background, their voices high, pitched and full of energy. The sound was jarring. The contrast so sharp against the cold silence in my head. I felt like I was walking in a dream, or maybe a nightmare, and I was just waiting for it to be over. As we moved past the living room, I noticed the small details that made the house feel lived, in scattered toys, family pictures on the walls, the faint smell of dinner in the air. It was a normal home, a place where families lived and grew. But I wasn't here for a normal visit. I was here to confront a lie that had been years in the making. Melanie didn't say anything as she led me down a narrow hallway. The weight of her silence pressed on me, making every step feel heavier. I wanted to ask so many things, but I didn't know how. I was trying to piece together the fragments of a relationship that had just crumbled before me. She stopped at a door at the end of the hallway and turned to face me. Her expression was unreadable. "I think it's time you meet him," she said, her voice soft but tinged with something I couldn't place. Sympathy. Guilt. I couldn't tell. I nodded, even though I didn't know what I was walking into. I wasn't prepared for what was behind that door. Nobody could be. She opened it, and I stepped inside. Brett was sitting on a couch in the middle of the room, completely absorbed in a video game. His eyes were glued to the screen, his fingers moving quickly over the controller. The room was a mess, empty energy drink cans piled on the coffee table, pizza boxes stacked haphazardly in the corner, and dirty laundry scattered on the floor. It smelled stale, like a place that hadn't seen a real cleaning in far too long. I froze in the doorway, my breath catching in my throat. This was not the man I'd been dating. Not the person I'd spent hours on the phone with, who sent me care packages and promised he was coming home soon. This was a stranger. A stranger living in a basement, surrounded by clutter, with no apparent concern for anything beyond his next gaming session. He didn't even look up when I entered. I stood there for what felt like forever, just staring at him. His hair was longer than I remembered, unkempt and grazy. His face was fuller, less sharp. He hadn't shaved in days, maybe longer. He looked tired. But not in the way someone would after being deployed. He looked like someone who hadn't bothered to take care of himself in years. It took a moment before he finally paused the game, pulled off his headset, and turned toward me. His expression shifted immediately, from confusion to something like panic. Then, just as quickly, it was replaced with a weirdly casual smile, like nothing was wrong. "Reese?" he asked, his voice uncertain, as if he wasn't even sure it was me standing in front of him. He looked me up and down, his gaze flickering over my face like he was trying to remember who I was. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. All I could do was stare at him, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't the man I loved. This wasn't the man I'd been waiting for. "What is this?" I finally managed to say, my voice trembling with anger, confusion, and disbelief. "What the hell is going on?" He set the controller down and stood up, but he didn't look at me. He shifted uncomfortably, running his hand through his hair. His eyes darted around the room like he was looking for an escape. He cleared his throat, then began speaking in a rushed, stilted way, as if he'd rehearsed this speech in his head 100 times. "I can explain," he said, his voice sounding defensive but also strangely rehearsed. "It's not what it looks like, okay? Just give me a minute." I felt my hands shake as I clenched them into fists, trying to control the surge of rage that was building inside me. "I don't need your explanations, Brett. I need the truth." The real truth. He looked at me for a moment, then seemed to deflate. His shoulders slumped, and he finally met my eyes. Okay, fine, he said, his voice quieter now, more resigned. You want the truth. I never was in the Navy. I never was a trauma surgeon. I bought that uniform online. I didn't want to disappoint you. I didn't know how to tell you I was just me. Just some guy who couldn't get his life together. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't know what to say. I felt dizzy. Like the world around me was spinning and I couldn't keep up. All this time, all the hours we'd spent talking, all the promises he'd made, had been lies. It wasn't just his military career that was fake. It was everything. You faked everything. I whispered, barely able to breathe. The video calls, the dates, the trips. All of it was a lie. Brett's face hardened, but he didn't look at me. He stared down at the floor, his jaw tightening. I didn't know how to stop, he admitted, his voice barely audible. I got in too deep. At first, it was just a joke. But then you believed me. And I didn't know how to tell you the truth without losing you. I could feel the anger rising in my chest again, hot and fast. I stepped toward him, my voice shaking with rage. You didn't know how to tell me the truth. You've been lying to me for 3 years, Brett. 3 years of my life that I'll never get back. You were never who I thought you were. He took a step back, his expression shifting to one of confusion. You don't understand. I was just trying to survive. I was trying to make something of myself. But nothing worked. I lost my job, I couldn't get another one, and I didn't know what else to do. I was just trying to be someone for you. Someone you could be proud of. I shook my head, the tears welling in my eyes. No, Brett. You weren't trying to be someone for me. You were trying to be someone you weren't. And you hurt me in the process. He opened his mouth to say something, but I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want any more lies. I turned and walked out of the basement, not bothering to look back. I didn't know what I expected to find when I came here, but it wasn't this. I was living a nightmare, and there was no waking up from it. Melanie was waiting for me when I stepped back into the living room. She didn't say anything right away, but her eyes told me everything. She knew. She had known for years. He's been living in my basement for 5 years, she said quietly, her voice tinged with something like regret. I didn't know what he was doing, but I should have. I should have seen it. I barely heard Melanie's words. They were muffled, distant, as if they were coming from a far-off place I couldn't quite reach. The basement, the mess, Brett's face, it all seemed like a bad dream, something that couldn't possibly be real. My mind was spinning. I couldn't comprehend how this was my life now. How the man I had loved for 3 years, the man who had been the center of my world, had been lying to me the entire time. He's been living in my basement for 5 years, Melanie repeated, her voice soft, almost apologetic. I didn't know what he was doing, but I should have. I should have seen it. I turned away from her, needing space to breathe, needing to process everything. The walls of the house felt like they were closing in on me. How could I have been so blind? How had Brett fooled me for so long? For 3 years, I believed in him, in us. I believed in a future together. And now, everything was built on lies. The house was quiet for a moment, the only sound the distant chatter of Melanie's children, playing in the other room. I could hear their laughter, but it only made the emptiness inside me grow. How was I supposed to go on with this knowledge? How was I supposed to face the reality of what Brett had done? Melanie sighed, shifting uncomfortably beside me. I tried to protect him, you know, she said, her voice tight. He lost his job years ago, and I let him stay with me. I thought it would be temporary. He said he'd get back on his feet, but it never happened. He just stayed here, playing games and pretending to be someone else. I didn't respond. I couldn't. What could I say? I wanted to scream at her, at Brett, but I couldn't even gather the strength to get the words out. This was all too much. My world had been shattered in an instant, and I was left standing in the rubble, trying to make sense of it all. I looked down at my hands, which were trembling. My chest ached with the weight of it. The man I had loved, the man I had trusted, was nothing more than a fraud. He'd used me, manipulated me, and I had no idea. I had given him everything. My time, my love, my heart. And for what? So he could continue living his lie. I don't know what to say. Melanie continued, her voice small, almost defeated. I feel like I've failed him. I never wanted you to be a part of this. I never wanted you to find out. But I can't keep lying for him. Not anymore. I glanced at her, finally able to meet her eyes. She looked as broken as I felt, like she was carrying the weight of a secret she'd kept too long. I could see the regret in her expression, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to undo the damage. You should have told me, I said, my voice shaking. You should have told me the truth. I could have. I paused, not sure what I was trying to say. What could I have done? I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the years I'd spent with someone who wasn't real. I needed to know. She nodded, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt. Pity. I know, she whispered. I should have said something earlier, but I didn't want to lose him. I didn't want to lose my brother. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat growing bigger. My chest felt tight, like there was no air left to breathe. How long has he been lying to me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. 3 years, she answered quietly. Since the beginning. He told me he was in the Navy, that he was deployed. I didn't know what he was doing, how he was pretending, but I should have known. I should have seen the signs. The words hit me like a blow to the stomach. 3 years. 3 years of my life, spent waiting for a man who never existed. I had loved him. I had trusted him. I had built my entire life around him, around this fantasy that he was someone he wasn't. I stumbled back, feeling lightheaded, like I might collapse right there. I grabbed onto the back of a chair to steady myself. My mind was racing, but it was like I couldn't catch up to it. The shock was too much. The anger was too much. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. Melanie stepped toward me, her hand reaching out as if she wanted to comfort me. But I couldn't let her. I couldn't let anyone touch me right now. Not until I understood what had happened, not until I had some answers. I'm sorry, she said again, her voice thick with emotion. I never wanted any of this to happen. I never wanted you to be hurt. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but it didn't help. The walls felt like they were closing in, the air thick with the weight of the lies. I couldn't breathe. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of this house, away from the truth, even if only for a little while. I need to go, I said, the words coming out in a strangled voice. Melanie nodded, stepping back to give me space. I understand, she whispered. I'll stay here if you need anything. Just know that I'm sorry. I never wanted this for you. I turned and walked quickly toward the door, not looking back. The weight of the truth was too much to carry. I had to leave. I had to find a way to process everything, but I didn't know how. I didn't know what to do with the wreckage of my life. I stepped outside, the cool San Diego air hitting my face. But it didn't do anything to clear my head. I just kept walking, not knowing where I was going, just needing to escape. I didn't look back. But I didn't know how to move forward either. I stepped out into the cold evening air, the door shutting behind me with a soft click. I couldn't hear anything but the rapid pounding of my heart. The sound seemed to fill my ears, drowning out everything around me. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. But I had to get away, had to escape the house, the lies, the truth that felt like it was suffocating me. I walked aimlessly down the street, the cool San Diego breeze biting at my skin. It was strange how the world could feel so normal, and yet so alien at the same time. The street lights flickered in the distance, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch forever. I felt like I was walking through a fog, unsure of where the path would lead, or how I was supposed to navigate it. My mind was a jumbled mess of thoughts and emotions, none of them making sense. How had this happened? How had I spent 3 years with someone who wasn't even real? The weight of it all was crushing. I couldn't shake the image of Brett sitting in that basement, the game controller in his hands, as if nothing in the world mattered but his next move. He hadn't even cared that I had just walked into his life, shattering the illusion he had created. The man I had loved was nothing more than a fabrication, a carefully constructed lie. I pulled out my phone and stared at it for a long moment. I had no idea what I was hoping to find. A message from Brett. A sign that this had all been a mistake. Maybe some kind of explanation. But there was nothing. Just the silence of a phone that had been flooded with messages from a man who didn't even exist. I shoved the phone back into my pocket and continued walking, the rhythm of my footsteps the only thing that anchored me to reality. I needed answers. I needed to understand how this had happened, why I had been so blind, but I also needed space. I needed to breathe. I walked for what felt like miles, letting my feet carry me without a destination. My thoughts were racing, flashes of memories and conversations with Brett swirling in my mind. The sweet things he had said, the promises he had made. It all felt like a cruel joke now, a performance where I had been the fool. He had built this whole persona, this entire life, and I had been the audience, applauding every step of the way. The sound of a car approaching broke my thoughts, and I stepped to the side of the road, not even noticing the vehicle until it was nearly past me. I looked up and saw a familiar face in the passenger seat. Jessica. She must have been out looking for me. I waved my hand, feeling a mixture of relief and guilt. Relief that I wasn't alone in this. Guilt because I wasn't sure how to explain everything that had happened. She slammed on the brakes and pulled over, the car screeching to a halt on the side of the road. The door opened, and Jessica practically jumped out. "Reese," she said, her voice filled with concern. She rushed over to me, her arms outstretched like she was going to wrap me in a hug, but then stopped herself. "What the hell happened? Are you okay?" I shook my head, unable to speak at first. I felt numb. The shock was still too fresh, too overwhelming to put into words. All I could do was nod, then shake my head again, the tears finally coming, although I didn't know why they had taken so long to arrive. Jessica didn't ask again. She just stood there, waiting for me to say something, to give her something to hold on to. The silence stretched between us, but she didn't push. She knew I wasn't ready to talk. "Not yet. I need to get away," I whispered. "I can't stay there. I need to be somewhere else." Jessica nodded, understanding without words. She reached into her car and pulled out a jacket, draping it over my shoulders before guiding me to the passenger seat. The warmth of the jacket felt like a small comfort, but it did little to ease the chill in my bones. As I slid into the car, I could feel my body starting to shake from the emotional toll. "Where do you want to go?" Jessica asked, starting the engine. "I don't know," I answered. "Anywhere, just away." She didn't ask for more. She just started driving, the steady hum of the engine filling the silence. As we drove, I watched the city pass, by the lights blurring into a kaleidoscope of colors. The streets looked the same, but everything felt different. My life felt different. We drove for a while, no destination in mind, just the need to escape. Eventually Jessica pulled into a small park and parked the car. The sky above us was dark, the stars barely visible through the city's glow. I sat in silence, staring at the dark expanse of sky, trying to make sense of everything. Jessica turned to me after a while, her voice soft but steady. "Do you want to talk about it?" I nodded slowly. It wasn't that I didn't want to talk. It was just that I didn't know where to start. How could I explain something so unbelievable? How could I tell her that I had been in love with a man who didn't exist, who had built a life on lies? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "He wasn't real, Jessica. Brett, everything about him was a lie. The Navy, the deployment, the surgery, the uniforms, all of it. He's been living in his sister's basement for years. He's never been in the military, never been a surgeon. He's just a man playing games." Jessica's face softened with understanding, but she didn't interrupt. She just listened, her eyes never leaving mine as I spoke. "I've been living a lie," I said, the words finally coming out, raw and jagged. "I thought I knew him. I thought I knew everything about him. But I didn't. I didn't know anything." The weight of those words hit me all over again, and the tears came in earnest this time, as if they had been waiting for permission to flow. "It's not your fault," Jessica said gently, her hand resting on mine. "You trusted him. You believed in him. That's not something you should ever apologize for." But how could I not blame myself? How could I not feel like a fool for giving my heart to someone who wasn't real? "I just don't know what to do now," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Jessica squeezed my hand, her touch warm and firm. "We'll figure it out. One step at a time, Reese. You're not alone in this." I nodded, but even though her words were comforting, I knew this was something I would have to work through on my own. The hardest part was still ahead, facing the consequences, facing the truth, and finding a way to move on from the wreckage Brett had left behind. But at least for now, I wasn't alone, and that was the first step toward healing. I hadn't expected things to spiral so quickly after that day with Melanie. I thought I needed time to process, that I could take a step back and let the truth settle. But it felt like everything was moving faster than I could keep up with. The moment I returned home, I called my parents. I had to. They had trusted Brett, believed every word of his story, and I couldn't keep this from them anymore. I couldn't let them keep sending him money or praising him for a service he'd never performed. When I picked up the phone, my dad's voice was warm but firm. "Reese, is everything okay?" I swallowed, trying to steady myself. I need to talk to you and Mom. It's about Brett. There was a pause on the other end. What's going on, honey? You sound upset. I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring out the window at the empty street. It's worse than I thought. It's all a lie. He's not in the Navy, Dad. He's never been deployed. He's not a trauma surgeon. He's just been living in Melanie's basement for 5 years, playing video games and pretending to be someone else. I heard my dad inhale sharply, the silence on the other end of the line thick and heavy. Then, in a low voice, he said, "What are you talking about, Reese?" I told him everything about the lies, about the uniform, about the visit to the military base. I recounted what Melanie had told me, the basement, the games, the stolen money. Every word felt like it was tearing apart the world I had built with Brett. When I finished, I could hear my dad's breathing, steady and controlled. "Reese, this is serious. I want you to understand that. If he's stolen from us or from Melanie, we'll figure it out. I don't even know what to do," I said, my voice trembling. "It's all so much." My dad sighed softly. "We'll figure it out. But you're not alone in this. Your mother and I, we're here for you, always." I felt a rush of gratitude, but it was tinged with guilt. I had let them trust Brett, let them believe in someone who wasn't real. And now, they were going to have to deal with the consequences of his lies, too. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a while. I couldn't stop thinking about what Brett had done. It wasn't just the lies. It wasn't just the fake military career. It was the way he had manipulated me, the way he had used my love for him to maintain his illusion of a life he didn't deserve. The next few days passed in a blur. Jessica stayed with me, keeping me grounded as I tried to process everything. She was there when I called my bank to report the unauthorized charges on my parents' account. She was there when I spoke to my lawyer, who advised me on the next steps regarding Brett's fraud. She was there when I called the police to see if I had grounds to report him. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let him get away with it. But at the same time, every conversation, every step forward, made me feel even more overwhelmed. I had invested so much of myself in Brett. How could I have been so blind? On the 4th day after my confrontation with Brett, I couldn't stay in my apartment anymore. I needed to get away. Jessica drove me to a park, and we sat in silence for a while, just looking out over the water. The sunlight was soft and warm, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice quiet but full of concern. I nodded slowly, though I wasn't sure if it was true. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm trying to be. But I can't stop thinking about all the time I wasted. All the things I could have been doing instead of waiting for him." Jessica reached over and squeezed my hand. "You did what you thought was right. You loved him. There's no shame in that." "I should have seen the signs," I said, my voice tight with frustration. "He lied about everything. About his job, about the money, even about us. And I just let him. I trusted him with my whole life." She shook her head. "You're not to blame, Reese. He's the one who lied. He's the one who took advantage of your trust. That's on him." I let her words sink in, but they didn't feel like enough. The guilt still lingered. How could I have been so naive? How could I have missed all the signs that pointed to the truth? After a few minutes, Jessica spoke again. "Have you thought about talking to Melanie again? About what happened?" I hadn't. I had barely processed what she'd told me the first time. I didn't know what more there was to say. But something in Jessica's voice made me pause. Maybe I needed to hear more. Maybe I needed answers, even if they were painful. "I don't know," I said slowly. "I don't even know where to start." Well, you don't have to talk to her now," Jessica said, her tone gentle. "But maybe it would help to understand more about why Brett did this. Why he kept up the lie for so long." I thought about it for a moment. Maybe I did need closure. Maybe understanding the full extent of his deception would help me move on. I'd been living with half the story for too long. It was time to face the rest of it. "I'll call her," I said, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "I'll figure out what happened." Over the next few hours, I worked up the courage to dial Melanie's number. She answered on the second ring. "Reese," she said, her voice soft and hesitant. "Is everything okay?" "I need to understand," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I need to know everything. About Brett. About how this all started." She didn't hesitate. "I'll tell you everything," she said. I never wanted it to go this far." And so, she did. She explained how Brett had lost his job years ago and had moved in with her. How he had started using his fake military persona as a way to escape his failures. How, at first, it was just a way to impress people online. But then he met me, and everything escalated. I didn't know what he was doing with you, Melanie said. I thought he was just talking to online friends, playing games. But when you started sending him care packages and everything, I should have known. Why didn't you say something sooner? I asked, the hurt in my voice evident. I was trying to protect him, she said quietly. But I failed. I didn't want to lose him, and now I've lost everything. Her words were heavy with guilt. But I couldn't blame her. She had been living in the same lie I had. The difference was, I had trusted him blindly, and she had tried to protect him. It was a different kind of betrayal. I'm sorry, Reese, she said again, her voice cracking. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted any of this to happen. I know, I whispered, but I don't know if I can forgive him. Melanie was silent for a moment. I don't think I can either. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind was running on a loop, constantly replaying the same images, the basement, Brett sitting on that couch, the empty cans, the gaming headset on his head. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me, and I was left floating in a world that no longer made sense. I couldn't stop thinking about everything he had said, how he had explained away all his actions, like they were no big deal. Like this was all just a misunderstanding, something that could be easily fixed. But it wasn't a misunderstanding, it was betrayal. It was manipulation on a scale I couldn't have imagined before I walked into that basement. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. The lies piled up, one after another, until the weight of them seemed suffocating. I called my parents again, needing their support. When my dad answered, his voice was low, calm, but with a quiet edge I hadn't heard before. Reese, what's going on? I need you to understand, I said, my voice shaking as I tried to steady myself. Brett hasn't been in the Navy. He's been living in Melanie's basement for years. He's been lying to me the entire time. He's a fraud. The silence on the other end of the line felt heavy. I could hear my dad taking in a slow breath, trying to process my words. I'm sorry, honey, we didn't know. I closed my eyes, letting out a shaky breath. I can't believe it. I can't believe I was so stupid, so blind. You weren't stupid, my dad said firmly. You loved him, and that's not something to apologize for. He manipulated you, Reese. He's the one who lied. He's the one who hurt you. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I believed him. I felt like a fool. My trust had been abused. My love used as a tool for someone else's gain. And now, here I was, trying to pick up the pieces of a life I thought I had with him. I had invested so much time, so much of myself into this relationship. And now it felt like it had all been a waste. Have you thought about what you want to do next? My dad asked gently, his voice full of concern. I was silent for a moment, unsure. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know what to do with all of this. I don't know how to move on. You don't have to figure it out right now, he said, but we're here for you. You're not alone in this. His words gave me a small measure of comfort, but it didn't take away the pain, the devastation, the feeling of being deceived, not just by Brett, but by everything I had believed in for the past 3 years. I spent the next few days trying to process what had happened. I couldn't go back to my apartment yet. It felt too empty, too full of reminders of Brett. Of the lies he had told me. Of the care packages I had sent him that had never even reached him. I spent most of my time at Jessica's place. She was my rock, my anchor, and I didn't know what I would have done without her. Jessica had become my sounding board. Every time I felt like I was going to lose control, she would be there to ground me, to talk me through my feelings. She didn't judge, didn't try to fix things right away. She just listened. One evening, after dinner, Jessica asked me if I had thought about reaching out to Brett again. I had avoided thinking about him for the last few days, but hearing her question made my stomach drop. Why would I reach out to him? I asked, my voice tinged with bitterness. What could he possibly say to make this better? She hesitated before answering. I know it's hard, Reese. But sometimes hearing the full truth from the source helps. It might not fix things, but it could give you the closure you need. I didn't want closure from him. I didn't want anything from Brett anymore. But Jessica's words stuck with me. Maybe it wasn't about getting closure from him. Maybe it was about understanding the full scope of his deception. Maybe it was about confronting him one last time, asking the questions I hadn't gotten to ask in that basement. So, I made the decision. I called Brett. It rang several times before he picked up. His voice was tentative when he answered. Reese. Is everything okay? I didn't waste time on pleasantries. No, Brett. Everything is not okay. You need to tell me everything. I need to know why you did this. I need to understand what made you think it was okay to lie to me, to steal from my parents, to pretend to be someone you weren't for years. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I didn't think you'd understand, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't know how to tell you the truth. How could you think I wouldn't understand? I asked, my anger flaring again. I loved you, Brett. I believed in you. I trusted you. And you took all of that and used it to create a life that wasn't real. Why? Why did you do it? He was silent for a moment, and then I heard him sigh deeply. I didn't know how to stop, he admitted, his voice breaking. At first, it was just a way to escape, to feel like someone, to be someone other than me. But then, when I met you, it got complicated. You were everything I wanted, and I didn't want to lose you, so I kept pretending. I kept lying. The pain in his voice was clear, but it didn't excuse what he had done. It didn't erase the hurt, the betrayal. I never meant to hurt you, Reese, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought I could make it right. I thought if I just kept going, kept the lie going, it would all work out. But I couldn't keep up with it anymore. I never meant for it to go this far. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him how much he had ruined, how much damage he had caused. But instead, I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I don't know what you want me to say, I said, my voice steady now. I don't know what you expect from me. I can't just forgive you for this. You've shattered everything. There was a long pause before he spoke again. I'm sorry, Reese. I'm really sorry. I don't know how to fix it. I never did. And just like that, the conversation ended. There was nothing more to say. The lies had been exposed. The truth had been laid bare. And now, I had to figure out what came next. As I hung up the phone, I realized that I didn't need any more answers. The truth was clear now. I had to let go. The confrontation with Brett was inevitable, but I wasn't prepared for it. Despite all the pain and the lies, I still wasn't sure what I needed. I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear more of his excuses, or if I just wanted him to leave me alone. But what I knew, what I was certain of, was that I couldn't let this go without facing him one last time. I reached out to Melanie, telling her that I wanted to meet Brett, to get some kind of closure. She hesitated at first, unsure of how it would go. But in the end, she agreed, though I could hear the concern in her voice. She knew Brett wasn't going to handle this well. None of us did. It was agreed that we'd meet at a diner. I wasn't sure why I chose a public place, maybe because it was easier to imagine confronting him with other people around, a buffer between us. I told Jessica what was happening, but I could tell she wasn't entirely sure this was a good idea. Still, she supported me. She always did. When I arrived at the diner, my stomach was in knots. My hands were shaking, and every nerve in my body was on edge. The booth I had reserved sat in a quiet corner, but the low hum of the conversations around us only seemed to make everything feel more tense. The smell of coffee and frying food didn't help the sick feeling in my stomach. I sat down, trying to control my breathing, but it was hard. Every second that ticked by made me feel like I was running out of time, like this moment was slipping away from me, and I wasn't ready. My fingers drummed anxiously on the table as I waited for Brett to show up. I kept telling myself to stay calm, to not let him get under my skin. But the thought of seeing him again after everything, the lies, the betrayal, the years of trusting him, made my blood boil. He arrived a few minutes later. I saw him before he saw me, standing at the entrance, looking around. His eyes finally landed on me, and for a moment, his face softened. He didn't look angry or defensive, just tired. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by something like fear, or maybe guilt. He stood there for a moment, uncertain, before walking toward me. Reese, he said, his voice soft, almost pleading. He sat down across from me, not looking me in the eye at first, as if he were waiting for me to speak. I didn't know where to begin. I wanted to scream at him, demand answers, but instead, I just looked at him. He didn't even look the same. He'd gained weight, his face was heavier, and his eyes, the eyes I once loved, were filled with something I couldn't place. It was like he knew the jig was up. It was too late for him to keep pretending. You don't have to do this, Reese, he said, his voice trembling slightly. I know you're angry. I get it. I just need you to understand. I didn't know how to stop. I took a deep breath. You lied to me for 3 years, Brett. 3 years of my life, and you lied to me the entire time. You built an entire persona that wasn't real, and I believed it. I believed you. His eyes shifted uncomfortably. I never meant for it to get this far, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't know how to be honest with you. You deserve better, but I couldn't figure out how to be that person. You couldn't figure out how to be honest with me. You chose to lie. Every single day. You chose to deceive me, and you made me believe in someone who wasn't real. I snapped, the anger bubbling up in my chest. And then you stole from my parents. You took money from them, Brett. Money they trusted you with. Brett shifted in his seat, his gaze darting to the side. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I didn't know what else to do. I was so deep in it. I thought if I kept the lie going, if I kept up the act, things would get better. Better. I shook my head, my voice rising. How could you possibly think that lying, stealing, and pretending to be someone else could make things better? What kind of person does that? How could you expect me to just go along with it forever? To keep believing you when everything you told me was fake? I thought if I kept playing the part, it would all work out. You wouldn't leave me, he said, his voice almost pleading. I thought I could fix it, I swear. I didn't want to disappoint you. I stared at him, incredulous. You didn't want to disappoint me. You're sitting here telling me that everything was a lie just so you wouldn't disappoint me. Brett's eyes dropped to his hands, his fingers twitching nervously. I'm sorry, Reese, I never meant to hurt you. I really didn't. I know you're sorry, I said quietly. But that doesn't fix anything. You've taken everything I believed in, and torn it apart. And now, all you have left to offer me is an apology. It's too late for that, Brett. I can't keep doing this. He looked up at me then, his face full of desperation. Please, Reese, please don't leave me like this. I can't lose you. We had something real. I felt a cold anger wash over me. You never had anything real. You were playing a part. And I was just the fool who didn't see it. My voice cracked with emotion. I don't know what I was to you, Brett, but I was real. I gave you everything I had. And you took it all and turned it into something else. You lied to me. For years. His shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I saw something like shame cross his face. I'm sorry, he whispered again, as if saying it enough would somehow make up for everything. It wouldn't. I couldn't keep listening to his excuses. I stood up abruptly, grabbing my purse. It's over, Brett. I don't want anything more from you. I'm done. I turned to leave, but he reached out, his hand grabbing my arm gently. His voice shook as he said, Please, Reese. Just give me another chance. We can fix this. We can make it work. I yanked my arm free, spinning around to face him one last time. No, Brett, we can't. There's nothing left to fix. I don't even know who you are anymore. I walked out of the diner, not looking back. I didn't need to hear any more. It was over. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt a wave of relief. It wasn't just the end of Brett and me. It was the end of the lies. It was the end of everything he had taken from me. And I was finally free. The days after the diner felt surreal. I couldn't shake the image of Brett sitting there, pleading with me, trying to convince me that we could fix something that had never been real. It was over. I had made that clear, but it was still hard to believe it myself. After everything, after the lies, the manipulation, the broken trust, there was no way to fix it. I spent the next few weeks in a blur. At first, the pain of it all consumed me. Every time I tried to focus on something, my mind would drift back to Brett, to the way he had smiled at me, so confident, so sure of himself. How had I missed it? How had I believed in him when everything he said was a lie? Jessica stayed by my side, as always. She helped me sort through the mess, not just the emotional fallout but the practical side of things too. She helped me cancel the flights I had booked to visit Brett. Helped me return the care packages that had never reached him. And most importantly, she was there when I needed someone to talk to, or more often, when I needed to stay silent and just be. I wasn't sure what to do next. I couldn't go back to my old life, not with the constant reminder of the deception hanging over me. I couldn't keep pretending that nothing had changed. But I didn't know where to go from here. I had given 3 years of my life to someone who didn't exist. What did that even mean for me now? One evening, after a long day of paperwork and phone calls, I sat down on the couch in Jessica's apartment, feeling completely drained. The weight of everything was too much to bear on my own. I wanted to scream, to throw everything out the window, to make it all go away. But nothing was going to make this better. There was no erasing the past, no fixing what had been broken. Jessica sat next to me, handing me a cup of tea. "How are you really doing?" she asked softly, her voice full of concern. I took a sip, the warmth of the tea grounding me. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Some days, I feel like I can move on, like I can rebuild. And then other days, it all just feels like too much." She didn't say anything right away. Instead, she just sat with me, letting the silence stretch between us. I appreciated that more than I could say. Sometimes, the most comforting thing was simply being allowed to feel without the need for someone to fix it. "I'm scared," I admitted after a moment, my voice breaking slightly. "Scared that I'll never trust anyone again. Scared that I'll always carry this with me." "How do you move on from something like this?" Jessica didn't offer any empty promises. Instead, she nodded thoughtfully. "It's going to take time, but you will. You have to let yourself heal, Reese. You can't rush it. Just take it one day at a time." I nodded, trying to believe her words. I had to. I had no other choice. As much as I wanted to leave everything behind and run away, I knew that wasn't the answer. I couldn't escape the reality of what had happened. But I could control how I moved forward. The next few days were quieter. I started going through my things, organizing what I could. There was something therapeutic about putting my life back together, piece by piece. Slowly, the anger that had consumed me started to fade. I could still feel the sting of betrayal, but it didn't rule me anymore. It was just a part of the story now, a part of the past that I was learning to let go of. I reached out to my parents, telling them I was okay. That I was handling everything. Even if I wasn't entirely sure I believed that myself. They were supportive, understanding, and I could hear the relief in their voices when they realized I was making progress. They had been worried, and I could feel the weight of their concern. I had to reassure them that I was taking control of my life again. One evening, I went for a walk by myself, something I hadn't done in a long time. The cool evening air felt good against my skin, and the sounds of the city felt oddly comforting. As I walked, I thought about everything, about Brett, about Melanie, about the lies, and about the future that seemed so uncertain. I realized that, despite everything, I had come through this. I had survived the worst of it, and now it was time to rebuild. When I returned to Jessica's apartment, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in weeks. I didn't have all the answers yet. I didn't know exactly where my life was headed. But I knew I was ready to move forward. Slowly, but surely. A few days later, I received a message from Melanie. She apologized again, this time more deeply, and told me that Brett had moved out of her house for good. She had finally told him it was time to go. He had nowhere to stay, no job, and no future. Melanie had made the tough decision to cut him loose, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and sadness for her. She had done what she needed to do, even though it hurt. And I was starting to realize that I needed to do the same for myself. I blocked Brett's number for good that night. There was nothing more to say. He had made his choices, and now I had to make mine. It was time to let go. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself thinking less about Brett and more about my own future. I had a long road ahead of me, but for the first time in a while, I felt hopeful. I wasn't defined by my past, by the lies or the betrayal. I was defined by what I chose to do next. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to start over.